Welcome to Unapologetically Sensitive, where you can learn, relate, laugh, and maybe even live a bolder, brighter life. I'm your host, Patricia Young. This is a weekly podcast where we explore the strengths we have because of our sensitivity and some of the challenges it poses as well. The information in this podcast is not a substitute for help from a licensed mental health professional. Hey there. To the creatives, healers, sensitives, and deep thinkers, welcome. How the heck are you? I think today's episode with Jen is so relatable. We just did a check-in, and I think it all ties together, but we touch on a couple things. The primary theme is, are you able to take in positive feedback about yourself? Because the reality is, we all touch people's lives. You all make a difference. You matter. You make a difference in people's lives. If you have trauma and wounding and you're having a big reaction to that, then I'm sorry. You'll have to decide if this is an episode that you want to listen to, if that's really dysregulating to you. But I talk about some very specific, kind, poignant, beautiful feedback that a client gave me and how it was difficult for me to take it in. And we look at that a little bit. But the truth is, our wounding often informs how we show up in the world, the things that we are frustrated with, the things that we don't accept in ourselves, the things that we love in other people or don't like in other people and don't allow in ourselves. And so I think that this is really a very important episode that is relatable to so many people. And we touch on a number of different things. And even if we're not someplace, do people notice that we're not there? Do we tell people how we feel about them? What are the things that make it difficult to be vulnerable? And where does that wounding come from? And we take a little time during the episode, very briefly, to just get grounded and to kind of settle into what that feels like. I had to do it for myself because there's a part of me that really wants to minimize the impact that I have on people. And we talk a little bit about what that is. I don't know. I think it's really, really powerful. And Jen talks about looking at, what is it that I'm longing for? And what is the wound that comes up around that, the ouch, and how much we compare ourselves with other people. And it looks like everybody else has their stuff together and we don't. And this is so not the case. And Jen and I talk about this in this episode, but having this sort of love-hate relationship with wanting something, but then not wanting to have it. And I don't know. I just think it's really powerful. Jen mentions a poem in this. She didn't get back to it, but I have the link. It's in the show notes. Also, the book that she mentions is in the show notes. And I think that's it. So now, on to the show. Hey, Jen, how are you?
Hey, Patricia. I'm okay. Hanging in there.
I think you and me both.
How am I doing? I do love it when you ask me that question because a lot of times I haven't even really asked myself all day.
Yeah. You were having a lot of gratitude this morning.
I know. That was wonderful. Spontaneous gratitude.
Yeah. Yeah.
I loved that. Yeah. But here we are, mid-September, and just busy, busy, busy. Still don't have my schedules all. Actually, it was a scheduling gratitude, which I thought was funny.
Yeah. Yeah. I didn't paddle this morning. I didn't paddle Saturday. It rained. And so the water's contaminated. And then Brenda was out of town on Monday and I was kind of disappointed and relieved. And then this morning, I just on Sunday, the Sunday scaries, before the week starts and you feel like, and I just felt like, I don't want to paddle. And it's interesting. 2 people checked in on me today. They told me about the paddle. They told me who was there. They said they missed me. I thought, oh, which kind of ties into what I want to talk about is how we often minimize our existence and how much we matter with other people. We make such an impact on people and we don't realize it. And we have a hard time taking that in. And oftentimes, Jen, you'll talk to me about parenting struggles that you're having. And my reflection is your kids are so lucky to have you be there present with them in these moments, even though that they feel challenging and hard. You're so present with them and what a gift that you offer, where sometimes I'm not saying all the time, but sometimes, you're focused on how hard it is or that it's like, are you doing okay? And I just see the gift that you have. And I had a client tell me something yesterday that I really had a hard time taking in. And you know what that is. So I'm going to pause for a second and let you talk.
Let's talk a little bit about when we receive that information and that feedback from other people about how we've impacted them or what we add to their lives and how we react, how maybe we can take it in sometimes and we can't take it in other times.
Right.
And then just that perspective at all.
Yeah.
To be able to appreciate that. And then I'm also curious the other way, like, because I think there is a shortage of being authentic and vulnerable with letting people know how important they are to us.
Right. Right.
And so, we're on both sides of that equation all the time.
Sure.
So yeah, I'm really interested in that. And then I'm wondering if like something about pacing and self-care.
Let's trust it'll all come back together. So yesterday I have this client. I've worked with this client for a while. I worked with them individually, and then they took the online HSP course. We continue to work together. Then they just came back from a week-long event. They traveled to this place with other HSPs. And so when they came back, they were sharing about their experience. It was so touching because the experience that they had, a lot of things were not terrific. And what I loved and what she said was she kept thinking about how to pivot and make it work. So she could have come back and said like, ugh, all of these things were just like, ugh. But what she did with each of those bumps was, what is it that I'm needing? How can I take care of myself? How can I make the best out of this? Which was just so empowering and it was so beautiful. And I think it's so easy for us to often go into like, it was either great or it totally sucked. And it was a both and. But she was incredibly tearful. And she says this to me very, very frequently. But she says, I hope you understand how much of a difference you are making, not only in my life, but in other people's lives. It is really significant. And I was a little tearful, but my response was like, I hear it, but I don't feel like I take it in. Part of that, in some ways, I think is helpful because you and I just do what we do because this is what I want to do and this is what I'm meant to do. And if I got really caught up in the metrics, and sometimes I do, that impacts how I feel about myself. And if you listen to last week's episode, I'm still kind of rumbling with this thing with Melvin, and I've just been off. I've been eating some foods that don't make me, like when I eat them, it just affects my mood. It affects my outlook. So I've been a little bit off. I haven't been paddling. So there is this part of me, my gremlins are up. And in this moment of this woman being really tearful and genuine and sincere, what she said to me was, my hope is, and my gift to you is, I hope that you can really, really take in the impact that you've had on me, on everybody else, like that you really can embrace that. And I kind of felt this little wall go up.
Mm-hmm.
And even as we're talking now, like I can move in and out of that. And I'm going to stop and just put my hand over my heart and just connect a little bit. Like, what is it that makes it really hard for me? Like, I intellectually know that I make a difference. I don't think I've said this on the podcast, but the end of July, we had 500,000 downloads. So that means this podcast has been listened to 500,000 times. I think we're at 500,022, like 522,000 downloads. That's pretty significant. The average amount of downloads for the average podcast is 136 listens per episode. So, over the course of almost 4 years, that means that this podcast would have been listened to, I think, 32,000 times if it was average. It's not average. And I know that I'm making a difference, but it's like there's something that I keep it at arm's length for the most part, and I don't understand that. And what I know is almost each and every one of you that are listening have this at some point in your life, this part of you that like wants to be seen and loved and appreciated and valued. And this challenge of just accepting it and really drinking it in. It's like this young kid. It's like, see me, love me, love me, love me. I love you. No. So I'm going to pause and let you share while my hand is still over my heart and I'm trying to stay connected.
Well, congratulations.
Thank you.
On that marker.
Yeah.
And I am really just wanting to join you with your hand over your heart. And just sit with curiosity, right? About what that owie might be.
Yeah.
that makes the wall of protection pop up.
I think it ties into what you and I were talking about before we were recording, about how so many of you were not seen and heard as children and kind of had to erase yourself and to show up to meet everybody else's needs because you were told that you were too sensitive or too needy or too dramatic or too loud or whatever it was. We learned to erase ourselves and to show up for everybody else. And then that wound of feeling like we're too much. And you and
Yeah.
I, again, before we recorded, we were talking about how often that comes up for us in our conversations. If I'm struggling, like, I hope this isn't too like want for you, or, and you'll come back and go like, you're not too much and I'm here for you in whatever space you're in. I'm wondering if part of this is, and we were talking about authenticity and vulnerability, but I think that there's almost a way that I may keep my heart a little guarded because of that. I can do it myself. I can take care of it. I don't need anybody. If you let me down, if you disappoint me, I'm going to be okay. And if I were really to walk around with my heart as open as it can be and as vulnerable as I am, that feels scary.
Yes. Yeah.
Hmm.
Of course, these things are formed so early
Yeah.
when you truly didn't have the power and autonomy that you have now, right?
Yeah.
So those echoes, that owie, that wounding.
Yeah.
Which I just want to validate, like it doesn't feel safe. And what a complex problem to have, right? To want something so much. And then when it comes your way, to have to shield
Mm-hmm.
yourself from the very thing you're longing for.
Yeah. Yeah. I think a lot of us do this.
We do this.
Well, what I was thinking is oftentimes, and I've talked about this, Steve will sit down and help me to clean up or organize or do stuff. And there's a part of me that sometimes, like, I hate my neediness. I hate that I need that. And it's funny, before we started to record, I'm doing 2 summits, and one of them is on how do we push through hard things. And the first thing that I wrote was, we have to embrace our dark side, our shadow side. So for me, that's that part of me that's needy, and the part of me that likes, I want to be the center of attention. I want to be the favorite. I want to be the best. I want to be the most loved. I want it to be all about me. And I think that when I get feedback sometimes, like I did from this client so beautifully and so poignantly, that I also want to reject that part of me, and that it's that need. And I think those two get tangled up, and I want it and I also don't want it.
Yeah. Yes. And to sit with that simultaneously. I had a
Yeah.
teacher tell me we're wounded in relationship and we're also healed
Yeah.
in relationship. And it's making space for the both and of that.
Yeah.
Our disavowed self, right? Our shadow self. And
Mm-hmm.
then what it has, the gifts it has to offer us.
Yeah. So for the listener right now, what if you're going like, I don't get it. What you might do is think about the things that you judge in others, and then look at, do you allow yourself those same things? And often the things that we love and hate about people and love and hate about ourselves, it's the same side of the coin. And so, what are the parts that, if somebody talks too much or is too focused on themselves, and is it hard for you to take up space? Do you have a rule about everything should go back and forth? I'm not talking about people that are just, it's a one-way conversation, or people that, are very particular about things. I'm having a hard time. I don't do examples off the top of my head very easily. If you have some, Jen, that would be great. But I'm wanting to make sure that this resonates, and that as we're having this conversation, you can dial into what things come up for you, because I think this is a really, really powerful and important conversation.
Yeah. I think one of the ways in for me is to be able to hold space in myself for both.
Mm-hmm.
And what that is what I'm longing for. And in order to be with our longing, we have to be with our ouch, right? We have to be with sometimes it's deep. Sometimes it's just something that we didn't receive or have always wanted. And because it brings up that memory of not having been wanted or being seen, but then evaluated negatively, it brings us right in touch with that memory, whether we're consciously aware of it or not. And then boom, there's the protection, right?
Yeah.
So I'm trying to think of what to, in answer to your question, it's kind of like this love-hate relationship inside, right? I have something that I want so much, and then I'm so scared to get it. And then maybe if you have something that you get it, but you don't trust it, right? Or it's hard to take in. I know that for me, there's usually shame's around somewhere. So the dominant emotion for me will often, or maybe not dominant, but it'll be there, will be like a type of humiliation in that I even want it, right? And yet it's such a deep longing. We're human. Like there is things that we need that our system, if we're not getting it, and I go back to early attachment stuff. I know you do too. And if you've ever seen a video of a baby, right? So an infant, think about 1 year old, they did these series of experiments where the mother was unresponsive, right? So that could be not being in tune, not attenuating. And this is just a blank. It's not even like a negative. And the baby freaks out, like really can't. In fact, I do think that that blank is even worse than, maybe a negative response of some kind, but that you don't understand. And, hang out with a 3, 4, 5, 6-year-old for a day and see how, yes, they're brilliant and they're wonderful, but they're so underdeveloped, and the associations that they'll make or the reasons for things. Or I just got a little memory of a friend of mine that wanted to put tape on the ceiling because there was a leak, like the types of problem solving. There's a poem that I really love that kind of gets at this. I'll see if I can find it and read it a little later in the podcast.
Okay. I so don't get poetry. So every time you say that, I'm like, okay, whatever. I know other people really appreciate it. It's that part of my brain that's really literal. So it's like, if you have something to say, just say it. And this is why I love working with you, because we have different things to offer. And I know people tell me all the time how much they love you and your resources.
Aww.
But going back to the attachment, I'm thinking, I remember seeing John Bowlby, who did a lot of work on attachment. And what I recall is having a toddler old enough to walk, that I think they had the mother leave the room and the child became very upset. But when the mother came back, the child was very disinterested, almost that rigid, like needing that attachment figure. And then the attachment figure comes back and the kid is like, nope, don't need it. Which I think is a very young defense that I totally see that in myself. I've really been looking at some of my wounding coming up recently, and it's a little embarrassing. And going back to what we talked about, is the way to heal is to embrace all of those parts. But how many of us, we want something, we don't get it, and then we're like, fine, I don't need you, I don't want it.
Yes. I love that. So another way to look at it is like, what do you most want to reject? Right. And then to sit with it a little deeper.
Yeah. Yeah. And this kind of ties back to what we started in with is it hard for you to ask for help, to let people be there for you? Because I think we have this ideal of being needless and wantless, because what if I need something from you, you can't do it? And that opens this Pandora's box of rage of people not being able to show up for me or for you. And a little bit with this morning having 2 paddlers text me to tell me about the paddle and just to check in on me, where I'm like, oh, they noticed, I matter. Because I've in this headspace I've been in, it's like, paddling is stupid, I don't want to paddle, it's too much work. I know I go through this and I'll go back to paddling. I didn't share that with them, but but yeah.
Yeah, I think it's also, I'm just kind of struck by how it feels like the human game, right? So to speak, game of life is really set up this way. Like it's really designed this way. We have this one slice of perspective, and that's natural. I mean, it's like a natural law. So we can see each other as we're recording, right? And if I hold up my hand, I'm looking solidly at the palm of my hand, and you're looking, of course, at the back, right? So we can't. And then we have these breakthrough moments where someone shares an alternate perspective with us. And that's just between here on the outside, us and our world and the people in it. And then we got so many layers inside, even the way our brain is built, right? It's scaffolded in that we've got this ancient brain that we share with lizards. And then we've got a mammalian brain, right, built on top of that. And then we've got this big prefrontal cortex, right, that makes us human. And so we have all these layers. And that's more, I guess I call them, a little more primitive layers but that's where all of our survival stuff is.
Mm-hmm.
And it can really hijack everything. And then there's just the process of life where we grow and learn. And hopefully if we're doing, every day, you learn more layers forward. So there's like these depth of layers, and then there's these layers forward of learning and stuff. It's just wild.
Yeah.
So there's nothing wrong here, right? Like this is it. This is how it is.
Right. Which is why I love the work that we're doing. And I just had a friend, I was trying to decide if I wanted to say who they are, but I don't think I will. A former guest who's also a therapist that we talk regularly. And they were just telling me how much they appreciate that I'm so honest about the struggles that I have, because it's so validating and normalizing for them. And, I have a couple of friends that are therapists that are also HSPs, and you and I definitely talk about our struggles, but it's just so comforting, because I always thought everybody else had their shirt together, take out the R, and I didn't. And even in therapy for years and years, I just wish my therapist would have said that she had struggled with some of this stuff too, because I kept thinking, like, I keep coming to therapy and how come I still keep struggling with the same things? And I think that we can learn tools. And it's been really fascinating that the last couple of days have been hard for me. My thinking is off. And I've noticed that I have this really grounding in, this isn't how it's always going to be. I know that my perspective is off right now. I know that whatever narrative is up for me, that I'm feeling different or lonely or that there's something wrong with me, I know that that's not true. Where historically, that would have taken me right circling the drain, and that would have been the reality. And there's something that's kind of keeping me buoyed so that I can rumble with the gremlins that are annoying and feel real. But there's this other part of me that knows, like, it's uncomfortable and it'll pass. So how do we have tools to kind of keep us regulated enough so that we're not suffering, but we just kind of ride it through until it passes and it becomes something else?
That right there, right? I think I really want to validate everything you said there, because I do think that that's kind of part of the ethos of the time, that we hopefully just came through, and hopefully it's an era that's kind of ended, both from a parenting perspective, from a professional perspective, this idea that there are people out there that it's a very fixed mindset, right? You either have it or you don't. You either got your shirt together or you're a mess, right? Or you struggle. And I do think that a lot of our professional stances, and certainly a parental stance, father knows best, right? Don't watch your parents struggle. Like they just had all these answers, that we're kind of in it in a much more human way. I think we've talked about this before on the podcast, but, seeing Brene Brown do her work and say in her therapy session, like last week, because she still goes to therapy, I don't know that there were enough. I think there was a professional veneer, and maybe that was part of the gatekeeping or some of these structures that we're seeing coming down, or this just myth that other people had it together. I knew I grew up with, like, gosh, who let me become an adult? Because I'm sure not ready.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have it all together. Did I miss that week of school where like life was explained? And I think a lot of us were kind of walking around with that, instead of having both professionals and again, I think parents that modeled grace with uncertainty, with not knowing, with having an inner resourcefulness, that inner resources to use, and this growth mindset, really.
Mm-hmm.
Carol Dweck's book, Mindset, between fixed mindset and growth mindset, is really, really wonderful. But yeah, not living under this idea that some people have it. I remember being a young therapist and having people ascribe that to me. I worked most of my career with teens and young people, but then I find this in my older clients as well. Like, well, you never get mad. Like, you always have this together, and I'm like, no. I remember being very honest in that moment. And, I think in therapy anyway, there's been a lot about, well, this isn't about me, right? So
Mm-hmm.
historically, therapists didn't disclose. And I'm so thankful that that's changing, because my clients will tell me that it is in the sharing of the struggle and then the modeling how we deal with it, and not pathologizing the struggle itself.
Right. Right. When you were talking, I was thinking of how much the patriarchy is about keeping the status quo and not talking about the things that don't work and just keeping up appearances, which is why I think TikTok and somewhat Instagram is so popular. I know Snapchat is really popular with the younger generation, but what I love about TikTok is how real and authentic it is, where Instagram is very curated. And I notice what I kind of pass and what I like is when people are talking about their struggles. I think that we just want to know, like, is it okay? Is it okay that things are hard? Is it okay that we worry and get our feelings hurt, and the things that are just very human? And I think we're craving that sense of realness, especially in the midst of everything that's going on in the world, which again is why you and I feel so passionate about doing the work that we're doing, that we can be functional, helpful people that have an awful lot to offer. And we're still human. And that doesn't mean that we don't struggle with stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. I have some older clients who the whole thought, like the yardstick, and younger clients too, but like the yardstick is somehow that life isn't a struggle, and that's what'll have worked, as opposed to learning how to hold like that distance you were talking about,
Mm-hmm.
right? That, I mean, it's been called detachment. I don't find it to be detachment. I find it, there's a lot of acceptance there, and then the gentleness, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think we can grow that by saying, yeah, life is hard. Like, instead, we're coming out of a time where it's like, if life is hard, you must be doing something wrong, or you need this toothpaste or something, right? It's like part of that consumer culture, right? Is, let me kind of plug into this dirty secret that things are hard and you need something else
Stop
to complete
overthinking
you.
how to cure anxiety, get rid of depression. I still see that stuff, and it just drives me crazy that you're going to tell me that you can get rid of all that stuff.
Yeah. Yep.
So, is there anything in closing you want to say, Jen?
It's such a big topic. It's funny. I feel like there's all these little spokes
Mm-hmm.
that we could have gone down today. And I know we've talked about it before and we'll continue talking about it. I just really want to join with that client yesterday,
Mm.
just appreciating you and your passion. And I know for me personally, you have impacted my life in very deep and meaningful ways. So thank you for that.
Staying open and breathing it in.
There you go.
Thank you, Jen.
Yes.
And what I want to do is turn around and, reciprocate. And I'm just going to let that just sit
Yeah,
and let that be enough. Because how many of us do that,
that's
to
right.
get out of it and refocus on somebody else? So, to all the listeners right now, let's just take a big deep breath. Big deep breath in through the nose. Hold and exhale through the mouth. And if you're comfortable putting your hand over your heart, and can you connect with something that you just love and appreciate about yourself? And if you can't do that, maybe think of somebody that you really care for and a couple things that you love and appreciate about them. And do you also have those qualities? And if you're having resistance, that's okay. What is the resistance that comes up and what is the noise? And it's probably, well, I'm not always, and that's sometimes. And like who is one way all the time? Like, we're changing, we're human, we're imperfect, we get mad, we lose our temper, we are impatient, and sometimes we're loving and present and kind and generous. So as I settle into Jen's feedback and my client's feedback, can you also just kind of ground into something? And if it's bringing up agitation for you, that's okay. If it's too much, don't do this. And maybe there's something there that needs some healing, because when we have lots of trauma, it can be very painful to take those things in. It can be incredibly painful. So if you're feeling angry or agitated right now, might be a little trauma there that needs some healing. And that's okay. Anything else before we wrap up, Jen?
No, thank you for that. That was really wonderful.
Mm. So have a blessed day, everybody. And thanks for being here, Jen.
Thanks for having me.
Hey again. So my guess is if you're still here, it was not too dysregulating for you to do that little exercise at the end. And if it did get you a little uncomfortable, I apologize. And I think that we need to rumble with some of this stuff if we're going to have more closeness and healing and intimacy in our lives. Like, this isn't for the faint of heart. Anyways, I hope you found it helpful. I think this stuff is really, really powerful. I'm just kind of taking a big sigh and a deep breath to just sort of relax a little bit. I did find during the recording that my shoulders kept hunching up and I'd have to take a deep breath and I'd kind of watch them settle down. And I think that that's talking about this wounding. We can go back into feeling very protective and then, relax and not defensive, defensive, not defensive. So anyways, if you love Jen as much as I do and you want to work with her, you can reach out to her at Jen@Heartfulness Consulting. And if you want to work with me, you can reach out to me at unapologeticallysensitive.com. Jen also has some interns. So if you're looking for counseling that might be a little bit more affordable, I don't know what they're charging, but Jen is supervising them. Reach out to Jen and ask about her interns. And if you want to follow up exercise, maybe make a list of all of the qualities that you love in the people in your life or the qualities that you would like to have. Make a long list and then go back and ask yourself, which of these qualities do I have? I really find that it's very comforting when I put my hand over my heart and I take a deep breath, I close my eyes. And you might do that to kind of ground yourself and settle in and see what qualities you have and to write those down and put them up where you can see them. It's so easy for us to have this negative chatter about all the things that are wrong with us. And we really need to celebrate the things that are right with us and the ways that we connect and the ways that we matter. I often have conversations with Steve and he'll say something about, like one of our kids that he loves something that he did. And I'll go like, did you tell him? We forget. And I remember being in therapy and my therapist saying, well, did you say that to the person? I'm like, no, you can. So, are there people that you need to tell them how much you appreciate them or how grateful you are for them? I'm not talking about an exercise and just being all la, 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 la. But I think sharing those moments of gratitude and intimacy are really important if we want to have that depth and meaning in our lives. That's kind of where all the good stuff is. So, anyways, I've decided to change what I say at the end. I've said it in one of the other episodes too. I think when I started, I wanted everybody to feel connected and I used the pronoun our a lot. I think it's a pronoun. And I'm going to start saying your because I want you to feel empowered. So I hope you're doing well. Thank you for being here. Remember, sensitivity is nothing to apologize for. It's your superpower. Have a blessed day.